Welcome. My name is Beth Kluth, and I'm going to be showing you some of the techniques that I use to make these inked up galvanized metal pumpkins. I've been teaching this live workshop for about 3 years now, and there is so many different color combinations possible. This one happens to be denim and citrus. This is turquoise and butterscotch. And for the fall season, butterscotch, if you want a gold look, butterscotch is your friend because it creates a beautiful gold effect. One of the struggles that some of the students have is not knowing what colors to go with, and I can only bring so many samples. So I did create sort of a cheat sheet, not a cheat sheet, but a sheet that shows multiple color combinations and then lists what the colors are. So this will be available as a PDF to download after the presentation. And you don't have to use, obviously, these color combinations, but it just shows you a couple of my favorites. So the first thing we're going to do is clean our pumpkin. This pumpkin is from Hobby Lobby. But there are many, many different sizes and shapes of galvanized metal pumpkins you can purchase. If you go to Google and you search galvanized metal pumpkin and then click shopping, you will see an array of sizes and varieties. This, I just happen to like this size. I like the rusted leaves. And so this is the one that I usually use. This technique that I'm going to go through works on any galvanized metal. So there are galvanized metal Christmas trees out. There are galvanized metal words, letters you can find anywhere, and you can use this same technique. So the first thing we're going to do is clean the pumpkin. And you need to like bend these leaves up. Be careful. Sometimes I've snapped one off, but then you just have a 2-leaf pumpkin, and that's absolutely fine. And I used to clean the outside with alcohol, but I found that at the end, when I had finished painting, there would be all these tiny little spots where the ink didn't cover the galvanized metal, and I wasn't sure if that's sort of like the ink pulled away or what. But now I use blending solution to clean the pumpkin, and it seems to work much better, and I don't end up with those spots. So you just put some on a napkin, and you're just going to wipe off the outside of the pumpkin. All right, so the technique that I use to get the two very separate areas, but also the blended areas in between, is to work sort of wet on wet. So I'm working with multiple colors at the same time. This example, this demo I'm going to do is going to be butterscotch, sunset orange, and lettuce. But you could use meadow or willow or any oregano. These are all the Tim Holtz Ranger brand inks. You can use any brand inks you'd like. And then I use separate brushes for each color. And that's to really keep the separate areas while still letting them blend. I have found that with galvanized metal, you go through a lot of ink. Even though this is non-porous, considered non-porous, the inks do soak in. And so you'll be amazed at when you're working on metal how much more ink you use than when you're just using Yupo or ceramic tile or whatever. So you could do 2 at the same time if you're ambidextrous, and put these puddles on here next to each other. And I'm using sort of like a tapping motion, but I'm not brushing it into the metal. So then where they hit, which I did right on a seam, which it's harder to see, is where you're going to sort of get that blend. What you don't want to do is to actually paint into the metal. So you don't want to paint the ink on like this, because if you do, it'll end up drying like this. which is much lighter, more of like a light version of orange. This is orange. These are the same colors, but this was brushed into the metal. And it won't be quite as glossy either. So I would not brush it into the metal, and especially not brush it after it's already starting to dry, because you'll just go down to the metal and you'll have brush strokes. So the technique is to keep the puddles, guide the puddles so that they just barely touch. Here's another. I'll just go up here. Again, tap, 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 tap. I'm going to leave this dry on its own. It's still very wet. And then when I put the yellow next to it, you get that very blended look. Go around the side like that. And so that's how you're going to get that very blended look. If I wanted to add in a green, you can add that in really at any area. Overlap it a little bit with what else is there. Put a little bit up here. Bring it up closer so you can sort of see that effect when it blends. But again, stop, take the brush off while it's still wet is really the biggest key. So if I keep going around, I'm just sort of switching off. I'm not doing like one section all in one color. It's very organic. Just go from one place to another. Get up in that metal. You can paint the top and the leaves if you like. It won't look the same because it's rusted and it's dark, but you could if you wanted to. Sometimes areas will dry before you can get there with your next color. So I'll show that. If I go down here with the yellow next to the green, it doesn't blend as well because that green was already dry. And you'll get sort of these darker lines. Some people really like those lines. They're like veins. But sometimes people don't. And my suggestion is to get around the whole pumpkin, covering all of the galvanized metal, even if you're not really liking how it's blending, because there are things you can do after you have it covered to give it more texture and or to make it blend more. So I'll just do a couple more sections here. Go through. Like I said, you're going to be amazed at the ink that you go through. So I'll get down here. So we'll really be able to see the difference between painting in the inks and just sort of guiding it on. Again, if you need to, you want it to dry a little quicker, you can just blow on it. So once you have the entire pumpkin covered in this way, then you can go back and look, and you can do a couple different things. You can leave it if you just love it, which happens a lot of times. You just leave it. Or if you want, let's say with this green, it's a big solid area of green. If I want to have a little bit more green texture on there, I could just go in with that same green and just do a couple little dots. And so that's what's going to give you, if you're a person that likes to go for more texture rather than solid. Here happens to be, let me see a line. Here happens to be a line where it's orange and it's yellow, and it really did not blend anywhere very well in there. And so what you do then is you use your blending solution, and any brush, doesn't matter. And if your blending solution gets colored from your brush, don't worry about it. It does not have to be clear for it to work. Get that on your brush, and then I just tap, 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 tap on that line. So I want this orange and yellow to blend a little bit more. I'm just tapping on the line, and then I just leave it go and let the blending solution sort of do its own thing. So that's where you can create more of a blended look where you have distinct lines, or you can create more texture. And then again, if you don't necessarily like the dark lines around it, you can just tap right over those. And you could finish one of these in 15 minutes easily if you just did the more solid blended look. You can play with it for you know, an hour. Again, you know, we all know we don't know when to stop. We just have to keep going. And if you do ever get an area that gets very dark and you hate it, then usually I don't suggest sort of starting over, but you can, the same way we cleaned our pumpkin. You can put some blending solution on it. You can wipe it off. You are going to notice that even when you wipe it off, the metal is a little bit stained. It's going to be a little bit stained. But let's say you didn't like that green in there and you would rather have it yellow. You can wipe that off and then go back in with yellow. And go like that. So very forgiving. You can keep going. You can make it very minimal. And again, there's a variety of color combinations on that PDF for you to look over. So when they're done, I have many that I have at my, you know, for my own use that I have not sprayed in any way, mainly because for some reason the metal, the alcohol ink on metal does not scratch. Now, if I would scratch these next to each other, yes, they would. If I took something metal, like a scissors, and tried to scratch it, yes, it would scratch down to the metal. But that would happen even if I had sprayed it with something. If I'm selling these pumpkins, then I will, like our other alcohol inks projects, do a first shot of Kmart varnish, about 12, at least 12 inches away, and very light coat all the way around, let it dry, very light coat all the way around, let it dry. And then I just do one coat of UV, and I don't really know if that makes a difference because I haven't noticed any kind of fading. Now, these pumpkins, I do tell the students that these pumpkins are for indoor use. They have so many seams and rivets on the inside as well. I don't believe there's any way you could spray it enough to make it waterproof. Water is going to get into those seams and rivets and it's going to rust. So I would suggest these are for indoor use. And if you just carefully wrap it when you pack it away, I'm not even sure if you really do need to spray it. So that's my metal pumpkin. They do sell the larger size. This is like a big mama pumpkin. Can't even get it on here. Look at how huge this is. This is probably like 12 to 13 inches in diameter. But also would be really fun to do again at Hobby Lobby. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And if you do make some pumpkins or other galvanized metal pieces with this technique, I'd love to see them. So please post them to the group and just have a lot of fun with it. Thank you. Bye-bye.